Well, hello everyone, and welcome to day one of our 12 days of comfort and color. Hopefully you are already working on setting up a cozy space for yourself. This is my little kitten Pickles, and she's real wily today. So if you hear her meowing, this is her, and I'm sorry. And okay, so remember we have two different lists of things that we need for this series. The first list is things of cozy. So the first thing of cozy is to get yourself some sort of a warm cup of tea or cocoa or coffee or whatever it is you want to have. I currently have this candy cane tea from Trader Joe's that I love. And so that's my tea. The second thing is to have a candle. And look, I made a candle for the series. Isn't that kind of cute? And so that says the 12 days of comfort and color on it. I'm going to light up my candle. And hopefully you're doing the same thing. Whatever it is that makes your space lovely for yourself. Come on, candle. You've got this. Beautiful. Okay, got my candle. The third thing is a cozy blanket. So if you've got some kind of a cozy blanket to put on your lap, it really does make it, I'm working it downstairs, but it's nice and warm. And then also your art space, you can customize it for the holidays. This is a vintage salt and pepper shaker. And now it's holding my paintbrushes. So remember, make your space lovely for yourself. Okay, we're going to move on to art supplies so we can get into it here. We are going to be working today. You can choose what size paper you're going to use. I am going to use 6" by 9". This is Canson 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. That's the one I like the best. So that's what we've got for today. Whatever paint set you have is just fine, but I'll link this one below in case you'd like to use it. I will be reviewing another paint set soon as well. And then I like to use a towel, but you can use paper towel. It doesn't matter. And a little jar of water. Don't have your water be too high. And then what else do we need? We'll kind of quickly go through this. A pencil and an eraser. I like a kneaded eraser. I've got a squirt bottle for my paints. That's nice to be able to use. What else did I not say yet? I did not say a heat gun. So if you've got a little craft heat gun, I don't know how much we'll need it today, but it's nice to just kind of keep around and have near you. And then we do have our template for this one. So if you didn't already, you can go to the day 0 video and you can find this little template. It's just going to make it so that we get to really customize what's inside, but they'll all look sort of uniform if you were to put them near each other or whatever, but it's just going to give us a nice, I think, look to it. I would not copy all these onto your paper ahead of time because we'll be doing different things with them. So that's what we need for today. So let's see. Make sure your space is set up. You have what you need, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so what we're going to need for now is your piece of paper and your template. I've got my pencil and my kneaded eraser, and then this is where we're going today, is something like this. So this one, some might be more simple than others. I don't know if this looks simple to you or complicated. It could be either, depending on what you've done in the past. But this is what we're going to do. So the first thing that we need is we're going to turn this over. So we're going to actually, some will be right, some will be left, some will be taller, some will be fatter. It's just going to be different each day, but our template is going to give us a good starting point for that. And as we just kind of observe for a moment, I think you can tell it's blotchy and weird looking, right? But I actually thought that might be a fun thing to play with. So if you do not like this look, that's not what you'll do today. If you do, the reason we got it blotchy, so I was like, you know what? Because we're kind of trying for a flat, even wash between everything in here. And that's a little tricky to make them all uniform. And I thought, well, what if instead of trying to make them uniform, when we paint, we get into these spots and then we paint down here and we come back and we add some paint and we mess with it a little bit to see if we can get this look, which actually is interesting. And so if you want that, you'll do that today. And if you don't, you won't. And I'll talk to you about how to do both. And then the other thing is I used this red color throughout the whole thing, but maybe you'll go, red, orange, or maybe not red, maybe or orange. You'll go red, blue, green, dark blue, pink. Maybe you'll do all these holiday colors in between. So you absolutely have options for this one. This is what we've got to start with. So, and you'll notice right off the bat, if you did the acorns tutorial with Kelly and I, which came out just a little bit ago, this pattern is from one of the acorns and I loved it. So we're using that one. So, okay, so we're going to take our little template here. And for this one, it pretty much is just kind of like, if you look at this part, it's kind of vertical on the page. And it just needs to be sort of centered, so you can put it anywhere you want. When I'm placing, I do look for somewhat equal spacing left and right, top and bottom. And so we'll do that like this today. And we're going to do really light pencil around it. But notice the way it differs is that we don't have it dip in here. There's no like cuff on this stocking today. So when we get to this, we'll actually go like this and ignore it and follow the line down. So let's trace our little template. I'll kind of zoom in on it with you. We're just hanging out together for a minute here, getting this on here. Anytime we work with a pencil, I do like to remind you to press really lightly, because if anything goes wrong and you've pressed hard, you're just not going to be able to erase it without seeing some of the lines. So when I get over here, I'm going to take this and just go this nice straight line. I'm just going to kind of wing it like this. And in a moment, if that's weird and dips out too much, we'll just straighten out that line. So press lightly. I'm excited to be hanging out with you all again. If you are new here for this series, we wrapped up a series in the end of October where throughout that month we did 30 watercolor tips and tricks. So you learned hopefully a lot about watercolor during that series. And so if that's new to you, you might want to check it out. So I'm getting here and I want to straighten this out, but now I'll lift the whole thing up and we'll see what we got. Like, oh, look, I missed some. That's fine. A little bit here as well. And then this line I think did get just a little bit weird. So I am going to, one thing that we can do is like grab a piece of paper if you have one near you and use it to straighten it out. But I actually don't care how straight it is. I don't need it to be perfectly straight. I'm just going to use that as like something to eyeball it with. And I'll straighten out my line before I erase anything. And then I'll go in with this little kneaded eraser and get rid of the line I didn't like. But I think if you erase it first, you might just put that line back in the exact same spot. So I like to fix it and then erase. Okay, that was like our fastest drawing yet. Template for the win. And if you have anything weird on here, go ahead and erase it now. With watercolor, once we paint on top of our pencil, it's pretty much locked in. I have people sometimes tell me they can get it up, but I cannot trust that that will happen. So we like to erase ahead of time. And now as we look at this, I'm going to see if you can see it. There is a grid that we did with pencil first. And it's these vertical lines down the centers here and horizontal like this. So we're actually just doing a grid like this. I liked to divide it into 1, 2, 3 sections so that we have 1, 2, 3 squares across. If you have done this lots of times, maybe you came here from Zentangle or something, or you doodle this a lot and you want to make it more complicated, you will do a smaller, tighter grid, but I'm going to do it like this in 3 rows. And how I'll get those rows is I want to kind of wing it, but I want to think about this is my basic width and I want to divide that into thirds. So I'm going to put a dot where I think those thirds might be. That would mean that 1, 2, 3, all of these spaces would be equal, and I can tell already that they're not. And I'm just going to kind of see, let me zoom in for you so you can see my dots. I feel like it's going to be about this, and we don't need it to be perfect, so we'll go with it. And now I'm going to turn my paper. So by turning the paper, I'm going to make it easier to get these kind of straight lines. I want you to press lightly on your pencil and not overthink it. For some of you, though, who are like, no, these lines got to be straight, then get a piece of paper, and you can take it and line the paper up at the bottom of your paper, right? And you can use that to get these straight lines. But I don't want to do it because we're not all going to do it that way. And we do not need perfection. This is supposed to be a comforting, relaxing time for you. Okay, so I'm actually just going to take my pencil. Notice I'm holding it all the way back here. This helps me get this longer line. And I'm going to just do this line. I'm not digging it yet. Hold on. Look how wonky it is. That's okay. And then this one too. I'm going to just see. We're all just doing the best we can, okay? I kind of do want to get that paper out, but I'm trying to resist it. I'm funny because I like order and chaos, but you know, like sometimes I think having the order helps you be loose and free in other spaces, but this is pretty good. If you want that paper, just grab it out. Then from here, I'm going to just kind of try to match this distance. It would be basically here. And if you've got space for another, you might put another line over here, but you just see what you have. And now we're going to try to match the width this way so that it's turning us into squares, okay? So turn your paper if it's helpful, and we will just kind of go like this, horizontal lines. So for a nice horizontal line, look at this edge of your paper while you're drawing it, because that is your guide. Okay, I know that's tricky, but if you can let your brain kind of absorb that one, it's just helpful. I had a weird morning already today. I was putting on mascara and I 3 times poked my eye with the mascara wand. Like, that does not feel good. And why? You know what I mean? like, why are some mornings like that? Okay, I feel like this is pretty good. We still will be able to clean it up in a moment if it doesn't end up looking the way we want it. So just press lightly with that pencil. And maybe here we'd have the start of another, and sometimes that looks really cool. So if you've got that, I think the most important thing is that these are basically the same size. So before we go anywhere, I want you to actually look at this and look, are some of these way wider than what is next to them? So these ones that are cut off, you can't really use those as well, unless you wanted to like draw, you know, the rest of the square. But if it's super wonky, we do want to adjust it, because you'll see, I think on here, when it's all painted, you can see like this one got a little wide. And so see how these end up creating circles later on? And you can tell my circles are not perfect, but it's kind of a cool way to see how similarly you sketched. So we're just looking for that. It's pretty good. I could have given you a template for this, but that would make it too easy. This one does not have any sort of a little palm or anything like that up here. It's kind of simple, but don't worry, those are coming on other days. And I think that the difference of some having it and some not will look really cool. So, okay, let's get rid of any pencil lines you don't like. So, like I said, once we paint, we won't be able to get rid of them, but they are here. And it does not bother me one bit. I think it actually looks cool that if you look closely, you can see that little bit of pencil. So don't worry too much on that one. And now we're going to continue sketching. We have our grid and we need to get these cool lines made up. I'm going to see if you can see this. Okay. So if this is a square from here to here and down, this is going to go from corner to corner, curving out, okay? And now we're going to bring it over here, and we're going to begin it, and you'll just do it with me, okay? This corner to this corner is where we're working, and it might help if you put a dot here, and like that's where it would technically end. But we're going to take and curve out our line up and over to this corner. Press lightly, because you will probably have some of these you want to adjust. We'll do the same thing here, pressing lightly. What does really help is for this to be a nice rounded line, because remember, in the end, they sort of create circle-like things. And then we're going to do the same thing here. This one's going to come up and over to this corner and back. So remember, nice rounded shape. And I already kind of don't love mine. I hate to say that, but like, I just know the ones I don't like, I'll move. So, okay, so that's 2. And they're going to have 4 of them meeting if this is the center point. So we'll keep going. And I'm already going to kind of adjust mine here. Great. Round it out, and definitely want to get all the way to the corner, because you want, when we paint, you want all of like the white to get to the center. Okay, all the way to those corners. And then, since we're doing this on repeat, I mean, you're going to stick with me, but hopefully you can kind of relax. Relax your body if you need to. Shake out your shoulders. Because when things are repetitive, it just gives us a moment to just kind of work on the same thing. And you don't have to think quite as much, I don't think. We're going to do the same one here, but this time we'll start at this base and come up to the right. Get my light a little closer. It's like kind of gloomy over here today. I think it's going to rain for the next several days. Okay, so see, we're getting this same sort of a shape, and we're just going to kind of work together. So this is going to be the center of one, which means there'd be one coming out. So this one will go from here to here. Let's see if I can get better light. I got one more light I can use. I don't know if it helped or not, but we'll try it. Okay. And then see this, I mean, it's going to be the most satisfying effect if this does kind of create a circle. So as you check your work a little bit, if you want to kind of look at that, it's kind of a satisfying way to do things, I guess. So here we're finding a center again. We'll continue with the same thing. And back to this corner. Awesome. And then remember, this is the center again, so we know this one comes up and over here. And now if we don't have an edge, you may want to like pencil in where it would go, which means this one would have gone further too. Do you see what I'm saying though? If your square is cut off, just take note of that. Like I'm going to shift this one a tiny bit because technically my line would be here. Okay, and then that's what I'm going to use for this one. Makes sense? Just want to make sure wherever the edge would be, that's where it goes. But then see, this went off of the edge, and I can use my eraser. I'm not left-handed. I tried. I tried so that it wouldn't be, my hand wouldn't be in your way. There we go. So it's going to cut it off like that. And we will keep going. All of these stockings are going to be different. I'm like really excited about some of them, including this one. Okay, look at this. I kind of want to move this line over to the right because I'm noticing it feels far. So I'm going to quickly move that line before I do any of this rest. And then I think I'm probably going to be happier with my shape, which means I may get another line here as well. Okay, so just look and adjust. So much of doing art, I think, is just observing and paying attention to what you're seeing and then deciding, do you like it? And if not, why? And what needs to change? And I just think then your own eye is what comes in to help. Look at this one. I'm going to actually kind of sketch it this way first, thinking about the circle since it's the last one, and then I'll get that inside. It's cute, huh? Okay, so we're just keeping going. Oh man, this is a satisfying one. I just think there's something very sophisticated looking about the pattern, but it really, when broken down, has a lot of simplicity. I think this is where you learn if everything kind of worked out the way it should. I wonder if this one would need to come in a little. So just my observing and stuff, and I'll just erase it if I need. Okay. And one more here, and watch, this is the one where it's gonna finish off that circle. So I can really kind of follow that line again. And when you look at it and you look for the circle and it's wonky, just adjust it. I love doing a good sketch first before we get into watercolors because this is where I can take some time with pencil and eraser and erase what I don't love before I get in there with paints and then sort of solidify it. Okay, so for these are all having something cut off on them. So you can just carefully pencil this in if you want to, but just realize you want to press really lightly if you do that. And then, but it's nice because then you know where you're going. So it's like, that's where it's going to end. Whether or not you actually, let me zoom in a little bit. Whether or not you actually sketch that far or like you leave it because you know that's where it would go. That's up to you, but I think it really helps make sure that the rest of the shape makes sense. So I'm going to do it like that. Same thing with this. I'm going to kind of fake draw it until I get up to here. And it really helps all that line up. And make sure everything connects, especially in the center of what creates these sort of flower shapes. And if I finish before you do, since we are hanging out together virtually, you can pause me. A thing that I think people in my in-person classes wish they could occasionally do, but couldn't. Something like that feels good. And then don't forget, pay attention to these little spaces too, because it'll be cute to have a little bit of color there. So I'm going to erase everything outside of my stocking. And we'll look at the whole thing. As I look at it now, I'm watching those circles. Anything that could just be cleaner, I will take a second and do, but you don't need to. We are not needing perfection, but I know some of you, and you do want that perfection. So make sure to erase anything that went outside of that corner. And I like how the top of the stocking is curved. So if I took it to a corner up here, I got to get rid of it. We're almost there. Now, some of you might want to fully erase this grid. I don't, but you might. And so if so, get rid of the grid that's inside of these little sections now. And I'm going to show you the painted one again, just so you can see it and next to it, so we can sort of see the similarities or anything that you might want to watch for. And I think, like, look how wonky this one as a circle is, like flat, and over here it's like wide and flat. So that's what I was looking for on this one. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. So if you're finished with that and all the pencil that you don't want to see later is gone, one more bit here, then you can take your pencil and your eraser and you can get those out of the way. It's kind of like cleaning while you cook. And then we will start by mixing up our paints. So I'm going to move this, bring this up here. You can see I've got some holiday colors going right now. So if you're going to do a bunch of colors versus one, then you'd mix them up. And this might be a good sort of showing of some different holiday colors you might like. But if you're going to do one like me, and I'm afraid this is like too simple for today. I promise we'll get a little more complicated, but with our painting, that is. But I'm just going to pick a red that I like. So get my water over here. So I'm dipping my, since this is the first one in the series, I'm going to quick show us about this. So this is our brush. We have a size 10 round watercolor brush. That's what I teach with. That's what I always kind of use. And we like it because it has a nice tip of the brush here where we can get into like fine, tiny spaces. It has a fine point. And then this is the belly of the brush, which is what holds the water. And so by changing the amount of water in here, we can make it act like a tiny brush or a big brush, which is why I like it. So for now, as we get into mixing our puddles, the first thing I want to tell you is you could dip your brush into your water and just rehydrate your puddle like this and keep using it. And that's amazing because like with acrylic paint and such, it would just dry up and you couldn't use it. But with watercolor, you can. If you don't want that and you want to make your own puddles, that's fine. You can take a paper towel. Okay, I don't have a paper towel right now, but you know what's funny is I do have baby wipes right here. And I keep thinking this will work, so I didn't mean to be experimenting right now, but here we are. I'm going to take a little baby wipe. I'm going to wipe off this whole side. Okay, so this is another thing that you can do with your palette is you can just clean the whole thing off. And this is going to leave it a little bit wet, so I'm going to use a towel in a moment to dry it off because we don't want water, which would like maybe pull our puddles together. So I've got that. I'm going to grab a towel. Usually though, just a little paper towel works great for this. And then I'm going to clean all that off. Okay. Got it. And so here we're going to make our puddles. So what I like to do most of the time is take a little spray bottle and spray the paints. You don't need to, especially if you're just using one color today, but since we usually do, we're going to today. Then we'll take our brush and dip it into our water. Two things about your water is when you're just grabbing water, you're putting your brush in and out, and you may have just gotten paint on your brush. So that's why I'm just kind of saying, don't hang out in there, because if you just got paint, you're going to lose all your paint. The second thing we like to do with our jar is just clean out our brush. So I like to go press, press, press. I'm pressing all the way down into the bottom of the jar. Instead of wiggle, wiggle. Everybody likes wiggle, wiggle, but you don't know if your pigment actually got released. So press, press, press. That's how we clean it, and that's how we know. But for now, we're going to take a brush full of water and grab whatever color you want to test out. So I'm going to do red. If you've got your little swatch chart, you can look at that to decide and see which ones of these colors you might want to use. These are these. It's upside down. We all hate it. There's pink if you start at the top up here, if you wanted to do pink, or you can get into these sort of darker colors. I'm going to do maybe the second or the third one, I would say. And if I don't like it, I might mix in one of these brighter colors. So we'll take that brush full of water and grab a color. I'm going to swish my brush around on here, swipe it onto my palette, take this brush straight to my water and back. And now this is a puddle. Okay, I'm going to just repeat that again in case you need it. So I'm going to start, I'm cleaning out my brush. I'm going to start with a brush full of water. I'm going to grab my color, swirl my brush around, swipe it onto the palette, take this brush straight to my water and back, and that is a puddle. Now these are the same color, so I could use them interchangeably, but if you wanted a bunch of colors, this could be a good time to practice puddles. We like to make puddles on our palette side, so I'll refer to these as your paints and these as your puddles. A puddle should be puddly, okay? And you can quote me on that one. Just kidding, I'm being a weirdo. Okay, but seriously, you should be able to move your brush around. If it doesn't seem like it's a puddle, it is not. And so a lot of times I have to tell people, add water over here to what you've got. So now you got to see if this is the color that you like. And what's interesting is we're going to be working in all these spaces and we want it to be consistent. So it is nice to make up a decent amount right now. And if you want your color to be darker, you need more paint in that puddle. Like you still need it to be a puddle, but you also need it to have a pretty good amount of paint. Notice I'm moving my brush around and I'm looking at how much can I see through it. If I could see through it really easily, it's probably lighter than I want. So I'll use something like this, and we'll probably need to refresh this as we go because we'll be looking for consistency. And that is enough about our paint mixing today, and we're going to get right into it. So we're going to use this as a map for which spots to paint on here. And first I want to tell you, maybe start with, here, we'll just do it together. We'll clean our brush out. Wipe it on your towel. And when I say that, when I say dry it on your towel, it's this. 1, 2. Okay. And then we'll maybe put the first half of our brush into that paint. And that helps us really control it from the beginning. And as we get into it here, we'll be doing these spots right here, acting as one. And remember, the tip of your brush runs along the edge of both parts. But you can press on your brush and lean into the belly of the brush. It's pressure, right? And then we want to fill this in efficiently. We don't want to be doing it really slowly where you're using the tip of your brush and kind of going, this is what not to do. Tiny like this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, really slowly. Because what's going to happen is this will dry before you get the rest of the shape finished, and we don't want that. Now I'm going to refer to a previous lesson right now. Oh man, I should have looked up what number it was. I want to say 19 or something. If you go to our 30-day series from October, it's called 30 Watercolor Tips and Tricks. You're going to find one called Negative Painting. And this one is a really good example of negative painting because I want you to look at what's happening. When you do your red, it's going to create the shape of your white. So watch for it. It is the outside of that. And so we're going to go to this one next. I'm going to refresh the paint on my brush so it's just the same color, the same darkness as with the space I did above. And see, I want it to be basically the same as the one above. So right here, I kind of cut into my white shape. So now I need to clean that up with a nice smooth line alongside of my white shape. So if you want to go to that negative painting lesson, but I will tell you the negative painting lesson, at one point I crack up during it because I realize I'm a disaster and I don't like the lesson, which is hilarious. Now, do you want to go see it? I'm sure you do. But negative painting, I think another lesson where we talk about it would be day 30 when we do the flamingo. But yeah, it's just the idea where the color that you're doing when it's darker is going around the shape, and it is like kind of creating the shape, even though you've drawn it in with pencil. It just really matters. So just watch the shape that you're painting right now and the shape next to it, both. And we're just going to kind of keep painting together. The baby wipe thing worked. I was kind of afraid, excuse me, that it wouldn't. And then I'd have to kind of figure that out. All right. So I'm curious what other things you're doing for yourself in December that are just for you. If there is anything else. I just watched a Hallmark movie with my kids last night. I'm not gonna lie, it was terrible, but it was also entertaining. Like, we all somehow liked it and hated it at the same time. It was lovely. Okay, I keep getting back into my paints. This is what I want to tell you. I'm taking from these paints pretty much constantly. Otherwise, some of these will be dark and some will be light. Now, remember how we talked about the blooms? To get the blooms, and that's another lesson on the 1 through 30, it's that these sections would be drying at different times. So now I can dip the tip of my brush into my water and just literally add some to these sections if you want to play with this idea. If you do not like how this looks, it's too blotchy for you or whatever, don't do it. But what I find is it's kind of happened naturally anyway, I think, on this one. So if you do it on purpose, then it's on purpose. Otherwise, just maybe watch what's happening as they dry. And remember that you can also lift if needed to get excess water out of these sections. So lifting is when you clean and dry your brush on your towel, and then you place it onto wherever you have excess water or paint, and you lift up that excess with your brush. I'm going to show you in just a second because clearly it's easier to learn when we see. So here we go. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Cleaning my brush into my jar, wiping it on my towel, and now right here I've got a little bit of excess. I'm just going to take my brush, touch it there. I'm lifting it up. I'll even touch it to my towel, come back and lift up any more excess. And what happens is you really gain back control, and then it'll hopefully help it all dry at the same rate. So here we go. I think it'll be cute to see what you all do with this. Clearly, we've got a lot of options for what to do with color. And if you know you're giving this to someone who always hangs up their cards, and you're putting this on a card, first of all, and then they always hang up their cards in their kitchen, and you know they love red, do red. And if you know they decorate in like bright, colorful colors that aren't exactly Christmas colors, then maybe, you know, like there's lots of reasons to vary this. Also, I would never expect that on your first time of doing this tutorial, you're ending with a masterpiece. And I like to kind of refer to the idea of piano lessons. And if you went to a piano lesson, you would never leave your first piano lesson thinking you would be playing a full song. And to me, that just helps me think about how with watercolors, you're building and you're stacking tips and tricks and you're learning on top of each other. And so you are learning some things today, whether or not you like how this turns out in the end. It's about the process and it's about the education. And then hopefully this month, it's also about just a relaxing time. I mean, you could burn all these in the end and it wouldn't matter. When you get into these tight spaces, you want to really control your water. So I have too much water here. I'm going to clean my brush, dry it on my towel, and I'm already going to lift some of that up. And then also for this, if you limit how much is on your brush, so if you started with a clean, dry brush and just put the tip of your brush into that paint for these small sections, you're going to have more control. Also in these small sections, if you, instead of holding your brush kind of on a diagonal, if you lift it like this and you're holding it really vertically, you can get into those points a little easier as well, because by doing so, you're making the tip of the brush a little smaller. Don't forget, if you're doing the thing with the blooms and trying for some uneven drying time, to just randomly add some paint into these other sections. If it's dry though, it's going to look like this. So it's really, you want to kind of add it while they're still wet. And I just added just a teeny bit of water to this one because otherwise it was going to dry like a hard line. It's funny, it's rare that I would paint anything the same color, but I just really liked the pattern on this one and wanted to sort of let the pattern be the focus. And remember to keep mixing up that paint to make sure that it is the same color throughout. Otherwise, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but otherwise you could start with like a dark red on top and end up with a really light red on the bottom. Don't forget to keep watching for what's happening with your white shapes. That will help you really watch your details and for smooth lines and on the edges and things like that. So we want each of these sections to basically be drying all at once. So if you found it, a whole bunch of it was drying up here, you're probably going to end up with like it'll look a little bit messy as it dries, and that's just like a watercolor thing. It's because it's transparent and it shows what happens. So I have a little bit more paint down here than I need as well. And I'm really watching right now because it gets complicated to see which are the white and which are the red. So watch for that. But this in a moment, I'll lift a little bit of that out. But first, I'm going to just paint a little bit more first. Turn your paper if it's helpful. And if it feels out of control, you have too much water. If it's drying while you work, you don't have enough. This is such a cute one, isn't it? Okay, I needed to turn my paper to get into these little tight spaces. Also, if we didn't do it here, you might have to make it up for a second, but really try to get this to make sense too, because these details are nice. Okay. Almost there. I've got a tiny spot here, so you're really looking at those, but also try to make sense of where the white space would be. Okay, and then don't forget, if you're doing the thing with adding some other paint while it's still wet, do that now. While it's still wet. The blooms lesson on the 1 through 30 days was like my favorite one. It's just so relaxing, so carefree. So if you're looking for something after this today, since these will be posted one day at a time, I would go do the blooms. Now this is funky up here and I can decide, do I want to leave it or not? I just cleaned my brush and dried it, but I know it's still damp. So I'm actually going to take my brush and just kind of soften up that line between the wet paint and the dry. I could even just paint the whole thing with my very barely damp brush. And what it did was give it a softer transition right here. But the point is to have these little funky lines on here. It's a funny thing to do because a lot of times you wouldn't want it, but it's nice to know how to do all the different ways. So if you look at this one, it does have the outline on top. So once you get finished with this, let's give it a good solid dry, because what happens if you don't fully dry this and you get in there with your ink is that your ink will be fuzzy. And we don't want that. We want a nice clean line here. So I don't know that I talked about what pen. You can use anything you want once this is fully dry. You can use a felt tip pen, but this line is going to be a little thinner than I want. And I want it just to be a little bit thicker. So I'm going to use this ultra fine point Sharpie. You might have a micron or something that would be good as well. And so I'm going to fully dry this. Okay, so usually we know it's dry because we don't see the light reflecting on it anymore. But in this case, I would sort of dry it that far and then keep drying it a little bit just to make sure it's nice and solidly dry. Never hold your heat gun too close to the paper or it'll burn it. It'll look like a burnt marshmallow. But for a minute, I actually just want to compare the red on both of them. And you can tell that we have two different colors. This is more of a darker red. This one has just a hint of maybe even orange in it, tipping more that way on the color wheel. And the variation just is different. But I think it's interesting. I think color bleeds are interesting to look at. And I like to kind of change people's perspective on it being a mistake versus being interesting. So we'll go ahead and grab whatever it is you're going to use on this. And the thing about this one is funny because, like, I know we just did things on repeat for a while, but it's like a lot of time on the repetitive things, or like the kind of, I think this part can be like meditative because you were just going over your lines and you can clean them up as you go. But it's funny, even though this has some simplicity to it in repetition and in one color. I don't know, it's kind of a long one. I have no idea how long each one of these videos is going to be, but I kind of like that, where I'm just going to teach the thing, and however long it takes is how long it's going to take versus trying to fit it into a time frame, because I don't trust myself that I'd give you a good lesson if I did that. I'm doing the outline first, and then I'm going to go from there. And a reminder to you, you can follow your lines perfectly or you can clean it up. You totally have options on this. So I like to kind of stay pretty close to it and also clean it up at the same time. Like if I wobbled with my paint, I might not follow that. Because what's nice when we get into this detail line is your eye kind of gets taken into that top layer. The darkness and like the crispness of a thin line like this. I don't know. It just works to clean things up. So everybody who was like real frustrated with how any of this worked out, or the blooms just annoyed you, which it could have, this hopefully is the part where you finally get to relax because you know how to use a pen or a Sharpie. And so it should feel good because this is the part where you clean it all up. You get your control. And I'm just following it around. I can't imagine. I'm actually so curious how many of you were like, I want more complicated. So let's say you did twice as many of these. I think you'll have a nice Zen practice for a while tonight or this morning. I'm curious, are you doing this in the morning, the afternoon, or at night? I like to work pretty much in the mornings. If I paint too close to bedtime, sometimes I'll just dream of painting all night, which I don't know, can be okay, but can keep me awake. But I'm hoping that this series will be nice for any time of day. All right, we're almost there. This part, the nice thing is all your guides are there. You're really just following along. So if you've got shoulders that are tight right now, try to relax them. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. We've got 12 days of this. Hopefully that's not too overwhelming for your December. And we'll keep doing stockings, but they'll be different each day. I hope you like yours today. I'm going to zoom out so we can see it. And then notice on this one, I did my signature right along the edge, which I like on these. So I'll do it again. Make sure you sign your artwork. And I'll remind you that if you're doing art, you're an artist. Here we are. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you want to share these, I'll have a space on my Facebook page at Audrey Shantz Art. And I would love to see your work there. You guys are so cool and you tend to like really encourage each other. So love to see it. And I will see you here tomorrow.